Everybody, and welcome to the State of London Debate 2025. I'm James O'Brien, the Mayor of London. Sir Sadiq Khan will be joining us shortly, as will 6 of his deputies. So we've got a panel of expertise which gives you, the public, an opportunity to question the Mayor and his team on their joint policies and commitments. The evening will be split into 5 distinct topic areas, which I will talk you through shortly, although when I reveal the job descriptions of the deputy mayors, you will probably be able to work out the subject matter for yourself. So with no further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Howard Dorber, the Deputy Mayor for Business and Growth, Tom Copley, Deputy Mayor for Housing and Residential Development, Mette Coburn, the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy, Kaya Koma-Schwartz, who is the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime, Will Norman, who's in charge of walking and cycling, and now, without any further ado, please, fresh I should say, from Buckingham Palace, please join me in welcoming to the stage Sir Sadiq Khan.
Hey. Good evening, everyone. It's fantastic to welcome you to the State of London debate. And thank you, James, for hosting. At the outset, I want to express my deepest sympathies and condolences to the families and friends of all those on board Air India Flight 171, which was due to arrive in London Gatwick Airport this evening. The events we saw unfold earlier today are truly devastating, and I know I speak on behalf of our entire city when I say our thoughts and prayers are with all those who've lost loved ones in this terrible tragedy. As Mayor, I've been in close contact with the government and the Indian High Commission throughout today. We know 53 British nationals were on board, and that it's highly likely some of the passengers were either Londoners or had ties to our city. It's why we stand ready to assist the response effort and support those affected in whatever way we can in the days, weeks and months to come. The State of London debate is an important feature in our democracy. Not only is it a chance for me to inform Londoners about what we're delivering from City Hall, but it's an opportunity for Londoners to hold me and my team to account and ask any questions you may have about the issues that matter to you. I'm proud of the progress we've made over the last 9 years. We've got London building again, with more council homes completed in our city than any time since the 1930s, and more council house building at levels not seen since the 1970s. We've acted to keep the cost of public transport down by introducing the Hopper bus fare and freezing tube and train fares 5 times, and bus and tram fares 6 times. We funded more than 1,300 new police officers on our streets and created more than 500,000 positive opportunities for young Londoners at risk of getting involved in criminal gangs or crime. We've made our city an even more attractive place for global investment. We've created the world's largest clean air zone, making London a world leader for environmental and climate action. And for the first time in the history of our city, we're delivering free school meals for all state primary school children in London. Now, since the general election, the new government has helped by increasing funding for TfL, the Met and affordable housing, confirming that High Speed 2 will run to Euston, and backing our plans to transform Oxford Street and extend late licensing. The good news is that we've also now won agreement for a long-term funding deal for Transport for London and a multi-year settlement for City Hall, things I've long been calling for. However, I am worried about the impact of some parts of yesterday's spending review. After 14 years of cuts by the previous government, the Met Police needs a significant increase in funding to avoid us losing police officers. And I'm concerned that the funding announced yesterday may not be enough. As Mayor, my job is to stand up for London, for your interests and for the national support we need, no matter who's in government. I promise to continue to do so, especially when it comes to vital issues like policing. I'm also disappointed that the Treasury didn't commit to investing in any new infrastructure projects in London. London is the engine of our national economy, so restricted investment in our capital doesn't just limit our power and dynamism, but risks jeopardising growth, job creation and new opportunities across the UK. You know, all in all, the Elizabeth line created 55,000 new jobs and 1,000 apprenticeships across the country, while making London better connected, more productive and more desirable. The proposed DLR extension could support the UK economy in much the same way, at the same time as unlocking vital affordable housing for Londoners. That's why I'll continue to make the case for our city. Another reason I'll continue to stand up for London is because I've seen firsthand how parts of our city suffer from some of the worst poverty and deprivation in the country. As someone who grew up on a London council estate, I know help for our communities should be based on need, not geography. A child blighted by lack of support and opportunities in Newham or Lewisham is just as deserving as a child born in the same circumstances in Newcastle or Leeds. We should never stumble into the trap of pitting our towns and cities against each other. Let me end with this. As Mayor, my promise to you and to all Londoners is that I'll continue to speak out and stand up for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Sadiq. The evening, as I said, is split into 5 distinct sections: transport, policing and safety, air quality and the environment, housing and London's economy. But I'll just begin, if I may, with a couple of questions of my own, as I think you'd expect. I register your worries, but the Evening Standard reports this evening that you're privately furious with the spending review. Should I ask you to answer that question, or should I ask your colleagues?
Well, listen, I've always been straight with you and with Londoners. I think this is a missed opportunity from Rachel Reeves' spending review. I think there's some good in the spending review. As I said, a multi-year deal for TfL in terms of capital expenditure, a multi-year deal for City Hall, more investment for the NHS. There's some bad, the lack of any infrastructure monies for London. The fact that we could lose investment in the Met Police Service and have fewer officers. I think there's some ugly. I think, the way to level up our country is not to level down London. And my job as Mayor is to speak up for Londoners and stand up for our city, whether the government is Labour or Conservative.
You didn't really answer the question. Are you limited slightly by the fact that it's a Labour government? If a Conservative government had released the same spending review, would you be a little more outspoken?
I think I couldn't be more outspoken. You heard my opening. You've heard what I said now. I've been quite clear. I think the government should recognise that it's in our national interest to invest in our capital city. It shouldn't be London versus Manchester or versus Liverpool or versus Newcastle or versus West Yorkshire. I think the government should recognise, particularly the Treasury, that we as the capital city contribute north of £512 billion to our national economy, £42 billion to the Treasury. We could do even more with the right support.
Thank you. We should crack on with the transport questions. If you just wait for one of my colleagues to arrive next to you with a microphone before you actually ask it. But the first question this evening will come from Johnny, who is from Enfield. We're there, I think. Hi, Johnny.
Hi. Sadiq, you've already spoken much about your anger with the government, and you've already mentioned infrastructure projects such as the DLR extension to Thamesmead and the Bakerloo line extension. But the real question is, given that the Treasury seemingly have given London quite a hard deal, are these projects actually going to happen under your mayoralty or not?
It's a great question. Thanks, Johnny. So do we one at a time, James? One at a time.
Yeah, we'll take one at a time if that's
great question, Johnny. So I was the minister, a lot younger, a lot darker hair, a lot less wrinkles, when a Labour government announced Crossrail, as it was called then. And I took the business rates supplement bill through Parliament, which meant that businesses in London paid a third towards Crossrail, which is now the Elizabeth line. These projects take a long time before they open. And so, whether I'm the mayor that starts the projects or ends them doesn't really matter. We need them as a city because we're a growing city. And so my frustration with the lack of investment for the DLR extension to Thamesmead is we can get going now. The shovels are ready. The government's spoken to us about speeding up planning process. That will unlock not 1,000, 2,000, 40,000 new homes for our city, tens of thousands of new jobs, and help stimulate growth. So I think there's still an opportunity for the government to give the green light and for us to deliver in this mayoral term. But the great thing, John, is I'm here for another 5 terms. So whether it's this term, next term, the term after, we'll get it done.
Do we want to hear from the Deputy Mayor on that?
I was going to say, obviously, Sadiq's absolutely right on this, but the multi-year deal that
that's the last time any Deputy Mayor is allowed to say Sadiq is absolutely right about tonight, okay?
It's absolutely correct that multi-year deal for TfL that we have had, it's the first time we've had something so significant as that for 10 years in the capital. That will give us certainty to invest in the improvements to the network, the tubes, the trains, the signalling, the roads, the buses, all the other projects that we've got across the city. So we should also celebrate the investment that we are getting in this space, which can be delivered. Those are shovel-ready. They're happening right now. From the back of the announcement yesterday, there are more schemes and more projects that can be coming in. And Londoners will notice a really visible difference to that, because that means more reliable tubes. That means better bike lanes, better roads. That means more buses. That means cleaner buses. It means all the things that Londoners want that can get delivered, but we are missing those big infrastructure projects that's so important for growth in this city as well.
Are there any worries about recruitment? Are the bodies in the country to work on big construction projects? Because there's shortages across much of that sector.
No, it's a really important. One of the reasons why I'm frustrated is one thing people want is certainty. Whether you're an investor, a developer, a train manufacturer, somebody young thinking about a career, if you know there are projects that will be 2, 3, 5, 7 years going forward, you've got the certainty of knowing the supply chain, you can make the trains, manufacture the trains, you can invest in making bricks, you can invest in modular housing, you can invest in doing an apprenticeship, because you know these jobs will be here going forward. That's why it's frustrating, the lack of the green light with the monies from the Treasury.
Thank you both. The next question will come from Theo, who is normally to be found in Bromley. Theo, what's your question for the Mayor and his deputies, please?
Will you work to secure funding for the Bakerloo line extension and for the project to be fully realised by reaching all the way down to Hayes in South East London?
So, thanks for your question, Theo. So the Bakerloo line extension plans we have are from Elephant and Castle to Lewisham Town Centre, because Bromley Council were against the Bakerloo line, for reasons that are best known to themselves, were against the Bakerloo line going to Bromley. So what we have consulted on is a Baker Loop, a express bus service, to do the same route as the train line would do, to familiarise locals with an express bus service, same stops as the station would be, but also give developers confidence that there is a very good public transport system there. We're talking to the DfT and Treasury about support towards design, which we need that work to be done in this SR. So I'm hopeful to make progress there in relation to the design work, but I'm quite clear from seeing the difference the Northern Line extension made in terms of Battersea Power Station development, the homes created, the jobs generated, and also we paid for a lot of it ourselves, that we can persuade the Treasury that actually there is a good business case for the Bakerloo line extension, which will lead to not just jobs in that part of London, but homes as well.
You must have some idea of why the council have said no. It's a bit.
Bromley Council.
Yeah, it's a bit disingenuous to say you haven't got a clue. They must have told you.
Well, listen, they're a rubbish council. They're not in my backyard council. They don't believe in progress. I think they're still in the 19th century.
Will?
I was just going to come in on a point on that Baker Loop and the bus service that are being provided. That is, again, another project that can be provided relatively quickly. It isn't a substitute for that new tube line. You'll know what it's like to use the tube, and the reliability is the opportunities and growth, potential to change jobs, where you live, etc. That's genuinely important for London. But bringing in the buses straight away, we've seen the success of the change that's happened with the Superloop being brought in very quickly in new parts of London. That's allowing people to get around faster with those express buses and form those journeys, connect up those communities for the journeys they need to make immediately. So I'm particularly excited to see that change with the bus service, even though we haven't got the train line yet.
So the amazing stat there, if James will let me. So we're lucky in London, because we've frozen fares over 6 years, bus usage has gone up by 2%. Across the country, it's gone down. On the Superloop, it's gone up by 11%. An express bus service means you get fewer stops, you get from A to B far quicker, and that's why the Baker Loop will be a game changer.
Again, thank you both. The next question is coming from Daniel, who is in Barnet, as opposed to Daniel Barnett, who will be presenting the Legal Hour on LBC this weekend. Daniel, what would you like to ask?
I'd like to ask Sadiq, to support London being a 24-hour city, what are the plans to extend the night tube from Friday and Saturday, and also to other days of the week, but also to extend it across all tube lines?
Yeah, great, Daniel. Thanks for your question. So just to remind colleagues, Daniel, you'll know this, but before 2016, previous mayors had tried unsuccessfully to have a night tube in London, and my promise was to bring the night tube to London. The first line was the Victoria line, and then we extended it to, there are now 5 lines which have a night tube on a Friday and Saturday. If there is the volume of traffic, we could look at other lines being night tubes, and also if there was the volume of commuters on a Thursday night, we could look into that. We are getting high numbers on a Thursday night. Thursday's a new Friday, you'll know. What's fascinating, though, Daniel, is the numbers of people using the tube on Friday after 5 p.m. going into the night is huge. People work from home on a Friday, but go out on a Friday night. On a Thursday night, people are going for drinks and so forth after they've been in the office. They're not staying in town 10, 11, 12. And so if there is a demand, 10, 11, 12, we'll definitely look into it, because we want to make sure that people can also enjoy Thursday nights, let them do Friday and Saturday. Other tube lines we would look into if there was a demand. Same goes for the Elizabeth line. If there was a demand there, we would do it. I just remind you, Daniel, we have the most comprehensive night bus network of any city in Europe, and also the Overground now runs a night service and some nights as well. But we are looking for opportunities to do so. Howard and I set up an independent nightlife task force. I've not seen the recommendations yet. We'll wait and see what the recommendations are. Yeah. But if that's one of the things they recommend, we'll look into it.
How do you, this isn't a trick question, I'm just curious to know, how do you establish demand for a service that isn't there yet?
There's a tipping point, and so it's a good question. Basically, it's chicken and egg. So you can look at the commuter travel, but at the times before the last tube ends. Last tube ends, roughly speaking, at 12:30ish. So you look backwards, and TfL will have a really accurate data for every station, time people are going and come in, and they look at the data in granular information per line, per station, per day of the week.
Howard, I'll bring you in here if I may. You have responsibility for business and growth. Is Daniel right when he talks about London being a 24-hour city? It feels a little less close to being a 24-hour city than it did before the pandemic.
Well, we definitely are a 24-hour city. In fact, if you compare us against other cities in the UK, we've got more late-night licenses, more 24-hour licenses, in more than twice as much as the next city. But you're right, it's been tough out there for the industry. They've had COVID. There's actually been quite a change in the way people go out, so people aren't going out as much as they used to. The cost of living has meant people have more likely to go to a gig or out once a month rather than sort of every Thursday, Friday night. But as the Mayor said, we've set up a task force to look at the industry and what we can do to support the industry. We're very pleased to say that the government has decided to run a pilot in London on licensing, which will give us, for the first time, an opportunity to have a strategic overview of licensing and look at where areas can be, more late-night licenses, more street licenses for people to do al fresco dining, and that's all part of supporting the nightlife sector that's had a rough time. But let's not say it's terrible, because it is actually it's a lot better than other places across Europe. And there's still a really thriving nightlife. We've got some of the best clubs, some of the best nights out in London. It can be better, which is why we've got the task force looking at it.
Okay. Let's take a question now from Alex, who's normally in Clapham. Alex, what would you like to ask?
Oh, hi. Hi. So I disagree on the nightlife. It's definitely decreased in the last 20 years. There's less clubs than ever before. However, my question is on fare dodging in London. There's more fare dodges than ever before. Every time you go through the tube, there are people tailgating, there are people not paying for their fares. And it's hard-working Londoners who are paying for those fare dodges. The tubes are crowded. The particles in the tube is worse than Delhi. We have the worst air quality in the tube. They're dirty. There's graffiti everywhere. What are you doing about it? It seems like you're doing nothing, but congrats on being knighted.
Well, Alex, help me feel lighter getting it all out. Let me deal with all four issues, if I may. So in terms of nightlife, the first four issues, I think, as Howard has said, we understand the challenges this sector faces. As you said, it's been going for 20 years. In the 8 years before I became mayor, there was a 50% reduction in nightclubs in London. And so we managed to stabilise that with new nightclubs opening, and then the pandemic struck, and the cost of doing business rates, consumer patterns changed, and so forth, which is why we've set up this independent nightlife task force. To give you one stat, in Manchester, there's been a 39% closure of nightclubs, Birmingham 37%, in London it's 19%, still too high, and that's why we're trying to address that. And watch this space in relation to the report the task force brings out. You raised three issues in relation to the underground, all very important. The first one is one in relation to fare evasion, which take it very seriously, because all of us will have paid to use public transport to get here, and it's not fair that some people haven't paid and are taking advantage of that. So we, for some years, have employed enforcement officers, despite the government taking away our operating grant from TfL, and despite the government cutting £1.1 billion from the Met Police Service, we've been employing enforcement officers, paying for the Met Police Service to come into the tubes, and BTP, British Transport Police, to come into the tubes. Fare evasion numbers in London are too high. They're about 3.4% of people don't pay the fares in London. It was high, it's going down. It was 3.4% last year, 3.5% last year, 3.4%, now 3.3%. Still too high. Manchester and Newcastle is higher. New York and Paris is 5 times higher. Still too high, though. And so we're taking action to address the issue of fare evasion. Graffiti is a serious issue, particularly on 2 lines, for reasons I can come to if you want me to, Alex, Bakerloo Line and Central Line. We've got a team that clean up the graffiti. Every 11 minutes, there's a tag cleaned up on the underground. That tells you the level of reactive work, but there's proactive work being done as well to arrest those, charge those, and prosecute those who are doing graffiti on the underground. Evidence shows when there's graffiti, it encourages more graffiti. And so if you can deal with it before it happens, or take it down as soon as it happens, it reduces the chances of more graffiti happening as well, which is incredibly important. And look, I say this in a respectful way, Alex. We have 3.5 million journeys a day on the underground. We've got 12 lines on the underground. We've got the Elizabeth line. We've got the DLR. We've got the overground. I genuinely think we've got some of the best public transport in the world. That doesn't take away from the fact that you've had a bad experience in terms of graffiti or seeing somebody tailgate. We are taking steps to address that. And the last point you raised in relation to particulate matter, which is the air quality issue, which I feel take quite seriously. So people conflate 2 issues. One is tube dust, which I think you mentioned, and air quality. So one is on the surface, one is below the surface. So the air quality issue above the surface is to do with particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, which is poisonous and makes us sick. We've taken steps to address that. But you're right to raise the issue of tube dust. Now, the good news is we've managed to reduce tube dust in the cabins of drivers and on the platforms by a large extent since 2017. We're way below what the health and safety executives say is dangerous, but it's still an issue in terms of those of us who've got allergies and stuff. So we are cleaning up more the tube cabins for drivers, but also the platforms. We'll do more of that going forward. So your experience should be better in the future than it has been in the past.
Why aren't there more people looking out for fare dodgers? Why don't we, because as Alex says, we might encounter people who are tailgating, but we very rarely encounter anyone being collared for it.
There are people collared for it. I mean, we'll give you the stats for the numbers of people caught for both fare dodging and also graffiti. The issue with the Bakerloo line and the Metropolitan line is, because they're both old lines, so the Bakerloo line trains are more than 50 years old, and the Central line trains are about 40 years old, Normally when a train's got graffiti on, it's taken out of service and it's cleaned up, so you don't see the graffiti on the train. The problem is, because there are fewer and fewer trains on these old lines, we're having to keep in service trains you wouldn't otherwise see. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so on the other lines, when there's been graffiti on the Pick line or the Northern line, we take it out of service, so you don't see it. But also graffiti vandal doesn't see it to make them do more graffiti because they're competing for tags.
Did you welcome Robert Jenrick's intervention in this area?
So I think anything that raises the issue of the great work TFL are doing is to be welcome. His motivations for him to explain, but I think it's important for us to raise awareness of the great work TFL are doing.
Final question on the issue of transport. It's a slightly mysterious one. It says here, Pathros has a question, but their geography is unknown. Where's Pathros? Hi.
Good evening, panel. My question, I'm a regular traveller in the underground. Central Line is concerning me most because it seems to be very comfortable travelling in Central Line. It's riddled with graffiti, and also the seats, especially the priority seats, are a lot of them quite well worn, and I even felt sometimes the timber underneath. I wasn't sure whether I'm sitting on a screw or I'm sitting on a timber. It's just Central Line especially seems to be quite bad. So
the bad news, sir, is you probably are sitting on a screw and you probably are sitting on timber. So the Central Line trains are 40 years old. So because we had an operating grant withdrawn from the previous government and a lack of capital funding, but 1 year in, we've not got new trains for the Central Line. What we are doing is refurbishing the Central Line trains. So the new Central Line, they're not new, the refurbished Central Line trains have better lighting. You don't feel the nails when you're sitting down on them. They're wider, more space for disabled and buggies. The first one's now in service. The first Central Line train refurbished is in service. Next year, you'll see more and more Central Line trains refurbished coming in. And I've been on one, they're fantastic. And so, as I said in answer to Alex's question, the two lines which have seen the least investment are Central and Bakerloo, which is why I'm afraid, so your experience and Alex's of those two lines are the least best in London.
It is the first experience many people get of the capital. I'm most obviously on the Piccadilly line coming in from Heathrow, and if it feels rough around the edges, it sends a terrible message to.
Which is why my advisors use the Elizabeth line.
And you can see the contrast between the Elizabeth line and the Piccadilly line, where you've had that level of investment. London put in 2/3 of that investment into the Elizabeth line, and we've got one of the world's best train line going from Heathrow into the city. We need that investment in the other lines, so the quality brings up to access people for the rest of the city.
And it's an important point, James, you make, because look, it's in the national interest, surely, to make a good impression to visitors to our city, our capital city, whether you're an investor, a student, a tourist, somebody with venture capital. And that's why, to me, it's short-sighted not to have any money going to infrastructure in London in the CSR this week.
Following on from Pathrose's question, for the benefit of people listening who aren't familiar with the Central Line or who possibly listening on Global Player and don't spend a lot of time in London, if you do visit and you do find yourself travelling on that line, don't flop down into the chair, whatever you do. You can do yourself quite a nasty injury. It's very, very surprising how hard on the buttocks the Central Line chairs actually are.
As of next year, I hope your buttocks will be improving as those new
This is what the people want.
I can feel a petition coming on.
Feel an advertising campaign coming on. Thank you for that, and thank you to all the questioners. We'll move on now to policing and safety, and we'll begin, with your permission, with a question from Max, who hails from Richmond. Good evening.
Yeah. So, good evening. For as long as I can remember, I've been listening to stories on the news about knife crime in London and the latest young person to have been killed. It's just been the same story for years and years. So I'm wondering, could you explain to me why it's so complicated to deal with this issue, and what plans do we have to turn it around?
Max, thanks for your question and the way you asked it as well. Look, there's one issue that keeps me up at night time, and it's the issue of violent crime, and knife crime in particular. And actually, yes, there are complicated reasons why knife crime happens and violent crime has gone up for the last 10, 15 years. But actually, it's quite simple. It's to address this issue, you've got to support young people. I call that being tough on the causes of crime. And when you've got youth clubs closing down, youth workers losing their jobs, after-school clubs not happening, lack of facilities during holidays, at the same time, as you've got fewer police officers, fewer PCSOs, fewer police stations, I call that not being tough on crime. It's hardly surprising you've got serious youth violence going up. Add to that the glamorization of carrying the knife, machete, zombie knives, flick knives, all these things. It's a lethal cocktail. I've met too many people, Max, over the last 20 years. I was an MP for 11 years before I was the mayor. Bereaved families, young people who lives will change forever because the injuries they've received. Communities traumatized. But there's good news. The good news is, and Kai is here to give more details, we've been investing in youth workers, youth clubs, after-school clubs, keeping kids in school rather than being excluded, a public health approach to address the issue of knife crime. At the same time is, frankly speaking, using your taxpayers' money to pay for more police officers in London at a time when the central government's been cutting it. The good news, Max, we've seen a reduction in homicides. Last year, the number of teenage homicides, too high, was the lowest since 2003. We've seen a reduction in young people going to hospitals who are the victims of knife crime, but it's still too high, Max. And so one of my frustrations, to use the word James used earlier on about my views of the CSR, is I worry, after 14 years of cuts from central government, unless there's a big stimulus of injection of cash from this government, we could see a reduction in police officer numbers in London, and I don't want to see that. And that's why, even though there's a Labour government, I'm a Labour mayor, I'm speaking out about this because, Max, I'm fed up of meeting bereaved families, bereaved mums and dads, injured young people, people scared because they worry they could be the victims of knife crime. So I'm not going to apologise for speaking out against the Labour Chancellor.
Well, you don't need to apologise for speaking out, but I think you do need to address the subtext of Max's question, which is that we've heard all this before, many times.
We're seeing now progress because of our investment, Max, in terms of the numbers going down. So it's not a small thing, James.
Kaya, would you like to add anything?
Fewest number of teenage homicides since 2003, that's 22 years, the lowest number.
Yeah, definitely. I think, obviously, similarly to the mayor, I meet with bereaved families regularly, and I can't tell you as a parent myself how awful it is to talk to a mother who's lost their child. It's the worst thing in the world, and that's why we want to do all we can to end knife crime in the capital. The mayor's right, we take a really proactive approach for this. The mayor's invested to make sure there's been over 500,000 opportunities for young people. He set up the first violence reduction unit in the whole country that proactively worked to keep young people away from knife crime. I think it's also important that recently the mayor set up the Violent Exploitation Support Service, which is a consortium of organisations, a group of organisations, including charities that have been are experts by experience, so really can talk to young people on the same level as themselves and explain to them why being anywhere near a knife is extremely dangerous. It's so important that we get this right because we want to make sure that we're keeping young people safe. As the mayor says, we're going the right way. We've had the evidence of doing this. We work really closely with the police to make sure that we're doing all we can in this space. It's also really good that the government has introduced something I was really frustrated about when I was a leader of a council, is there was actually a loophole in the previous legislation. So if you were found, a 42-year-old man could be found with a 16-year-old child, and the 16-year-old child could plea to have something called a national referral mechanism, which means there's evidence of exploitation there, but there was no offence on the adult. And this government is bringing in the ending of that. So it's saying if you're found with a child, you will be rightly charged with exploitation, and this will make a huge difference to organised crime. So we're really proud to be working alongside the government on ending exploitation and hopefully knife crime.
I know there are no sort of magic bullets, if you pardon the expression, Sadiq, but if you had £1 billion and you were required to spend it all on this, how low could you get it? I mean, is zero even feasible, and what would you spend it on in a kind of fantasy universe?
Listen, knife crime, violent crime isn't inevitable, it's preventable. You've got to go to the source. Work with young people at an early age. Kara and I go to primary schools and we meet young people, Max, And if you meet, these are children below the age of 11, 8, 9-year-old, you say, how many of you know somebody carrying a knife? Hands go up, it's remarkable. And a lot of it starts with young people facing an adverse childhood experience. If you start early, you can do stuff. After-school clubs matter. Keeping kids in schools matter. Having good role models matter, Max. Look, many of us here were blessed. Role models who are brothers or our fathers or our mums or whatever. Some mentors matter. You need policing as well. You need police officers to make sure those carrying an offensive weapon have action taken against them. You can solve this. We've shown the progress we can make, despite the government. We're really hopeful with a great Home Secretary we can make more progress. We've already now, in just 11 months, banned machetes, banned zombie knives, taken action against websites, against retailers, as Kaya said, against groomers. And so it's possible with the right combination of legislation, but also, seeing the best in young people, but investing in them is really important as well.
Thank you. We'll go next to Elaine, who's from Havering. Elaine, what would you like to ask?
Good evening. Havering, as you know, is your north-east borough on the verge of Essex. It's also known as the OAP capital of GLA, I think, apart from maybe Bromley. But I'm here for...
Let's not start a war.
I'm not... No, I think we beat them on that.
Okay.
So over for the oldies. But I'm here for the young. You touched on it there with knife crime. We've had several crimes, murders in Havering due to knife crime related to drugs. Now, you may think that's all hard drugs, cocaine, heroin, even cannabis. But no, it starts low. It starts with canisters of nitrous oxide. We are finding loads of those around in our borough. It seems to fall between policing, environment, and what can you do?
Yeah.
So the young are our future. We need them. If you can't find a plan to take control of the knife crime situation, because this will feed up the chain from the youngsters, from the incongruous canisters. They will then escalate up into cannabis, and I don't understand why you want to decriminalise cannabis.
Okay, let's pick on what you've already asked,
Yeah.
Elaine, if we may. Thank you.
But that is, the young are our future.
Yeah.
We must safeguard them. What else can you do?
Elaine, you raise a really important issue really well in terms of both gateway into criminality, but also the impact of antisocial behaviour on communities, and also how young people can escalate in terms of criminality and so forth. And many of us, all of us will have seen those little nitrous oxides, little canisters when we're out and about and stuff. One of the reasons why Kaya and I and the Commissioner are so passionate about neighbourhood policing is, they're the eyes and ears of policing. And a good Bobby on the beat knows where there's kids hanging around street corners involved in nitrous oxide, where they're getting it from, who their parents are, and so forth. And you've got to start early. One of the reasons why Kai mentioned the VRU is we're invested in youth clubs and youth workers, because they can explain to kids why this stuff is not completely harmless. They can explain to them why this is not an innocent activity, particularly if mum and dad are busy working or they're not around to explain why it's important. So it does matter them understanding the ills of nitrous oxide, and they get up to mischief when they're high on this, as well as you know as well. So what we've done on the enforcement side, Elaine, is we've got more neighbourhood police officers than we've had in the last 10 years. Neighbourhood superintendents, sergeants, dedicated ward officers, police commissioner officers, and we're rolling out even more with the new Met for London plan. At the same time, public education is important to explain to kids the dangers of not just nitrous oxide, cannabis, synthetic cannabis, cocaine, heroin, and so forth. And if a charismatic gang leader gives you this for free, nothing in life is free. Saying it's too good to be true, there's a reason. And Kara and I have met young people who are made to join county line gangs, made to join criminal gangs, and this is some way the gateway in. So I understand your concern. We are taking steps to address it, and we don't trivialise this at all. Again, an example of teamwork between us and the new government. The Home Secretary has agreed to legislate to bring in new powers around antisocial behaviour, which had been taken off the statute books by previous government, because that gives a way to take action. including dispersal orders and so forth, requiring a young person to sign a behavioural contract. If they breach that, that means action can be taken against them as well. So watch this space in relation to progress in terms of an issue that may seem not as serious as knife crime or that side of criminality, but it can be a sort of conveyor belt of the more serious stuff, but also the quality of life of people who aren't young is blighted.
Have you spoken to the Commissioner about the spending review? Reports today that the 13,000 recruitment target is unlikely to be met.
I have spoken to the Commissioner about the spending review, and he's as concerned as I am.
Is he privately furious?
If I knew his views privately, I wouldn't share them publicly.
Let's take a question now that's been submitted online. Thank you, Elaine. I'll always be havering over Bromley. This is from Sophie, who's in Redbridge, and she writes, as a woman, I'm worried about going out at night. It's approaching 3 years since Zara Alina was tragically murdered. What are you doing to make sure women feel safer in the capital?
Should I let Kaya answer?
I think Kaya can
for obvious
answer that
reasons,
one, yes.
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think it's so important, and it's actually one of the reasons I was so passionate about taking on this role. We know that globally, that violence against women and girls is at epidemic levels, and that can't be acceptable. It's not acceptable in the greatest city in the world for women to feel like they don't want to go out after 11 o'clock. To have a self-enforced curfew on your life is not what half the population deserve, and we need to do all we can to make sure that women get to work, get to live, get to enjoy every aspect of London. So we're working really hard. The Mayor's already dedicated £2.33 million into the work against violence against women and girls, and this takes a huge amount of different forms, whether it be toolkits in schools to have really important conversations with young people about misogyny, or it's directly working with perpetrators of violence against women and girls. We need to make sure that we hold men to account for the violence that they perpetrate, but also we need to make sure that we're giving women a safe exit, and that's some of the work that me and Tom have been doing through the domestic abuse safety accommodation strategy, which has seen over 23,000 women find safe accommodation in refuges. So we're actually in the middle of working on our new strategy that will be out for consultation later this year, and we are really proud of the work that we're doing currently, but we know that, you know, online harm is a new space we want to get into, and also that we need to do all we can across the GLA family to make sure that women have the very best experience in London.
I suppose normal media, mainstream media, will always focus very heavily on tragedies like the murder of Zara. But statistics can be sometimes quite reassuring. This is true in the context of knife crime, as you've pointed out, or certainly in the context of homicides. Social media can provide a counterbalance to the statistical reassurance. So if women listening to this wanted to feel encouraged that things are getting better, where would they go? Where would they find that information? How could they find out more?
I think it's really important that women have, you know, I'm sure many of the women in this room had really important conversations post the Me Too movement about the things that we experience, and we keep on sharing those experiences and demanding better. I think it's really important as well that the campaigns that the Mayor has led, like Have a Word Mate, actually are really important conversations. And I think it's okay for us to ask, where should women find comfort? But I think it's more important that the work that we're doing through the Violence Reduction Unit is actually about boys online having important conversations about what's acceptable and what's not.
We are in the United Kingdom in 2025, and we're reading reports about some foreign-born residents of these islands putting up signs in their front windows depicting themselves as Filipino rather than Romanian, because they think that will minimize the likelihood of having a petrol bomb thrown through their sitting room window or their car set on fire. Omar in Wandsworth has pointed out online that violence always gets worse during the summer. What are you doing to ensure that the scenes that we saw last summer in the aftermath of the Southport murders, and indeed already this summer in Ballymena and other parts of Northern Ireland, don't happen in London in the event of allegations or crimes being committed by people who may not have been born here?
Well, Omar's question, the premise in his question, a number of the premises are completely correct. So Kara and the police study data all the time, and in summer, crime does go up. Now you might think, well, that's why, but a variety of reasons, but the data shows it does go up. So firstly, James is right there. Secondly, my view is you don't suddenly turn against your neighbour or somebody else overnight. But similarly, you don't get community cohesion and harmonious communities by themselves. It takes effort and it takes work. And so we do a number of things from City Hall to try and engender a sense of resilience, a sense of community, a sense of stoicism. One of them is the recent campaign we launched called Loved and Wanted. I want every Londoner, no matter your ethnic origin, your religious background, your gender, your class, to feel loved and wanted. And an example of that, James, in London compared to another part of the great United Kingdom is last summer when there were riots across the country as a consequence of the tragic, horrific, atrocious murders in Southport. In London, you had people coming out to show solidarity to asylum seekers, refugees, and Muslims, which lifted my heart, but also should give us confidence, without being complacent, that in London we don't just tolerate difference, we respect it, we celebrate it, and we embrace it. And it breaks my heart that across the country there are people scared to self-identify as a Romanian, a Bulgarian, a Muslim, a refugee, because it leads to hatred and animus towards them. And I think, don't underestimate the importance, though, of keeping that work going. You can't assume progress is one where you can regress quite easily, and that's why I don't apologise for talking about values, about talking about why London is the greatest city in the world. And I don't, for one second, assume we could never have those sorts of challenges in London, but by talking about all the greatness in diversity, by talking about the contribution made by Londoners of Bulgarian origin, Romanian origin, Filipino origin, and others over successive decades, it reminds us why we are the greatest city in the world.
I mean, if you're getting your images of London from social media, as Theo in Hackney points out, you could be forgiven for thinking that it is a city where people are just getting their phones snatched all the time. He says he doesn't feel safe walking down the streets anymore and wants to know what you're doing to combat street crime. I'd also like, and be as brief as you can, please, I'd also like to know how worried you are about some of the depictions, and although there's always some kernels of truth in these depictions, that there is a deliberate exaggeration of danger and crime when you look at the actual numbers compared to the impression you would get if you were on Elon Musk's social media platform.
It's no coincidence when politicians want to make videos, from other parties, they choose London to do so for reasons that are obvious. But in June we've had some amazing events taking place, whether it's South by Southwest for the first time in Europe coming to London. We've had thousands and thousands of people from across the globe coming to Shoreditch. We've had the Concordia Summit taking place in London this week, London Tech Week, and we've had 40,000 people from 125 countries, and their experiences in our great city are very, 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 very different from the stuff depicted on social media. TripAdvisor, for the first time in 25 years, chose London as the #1 city in the world to go on a holiday to. And so I'd say respectfully to listeners of LBC, those who've got the app on Global, to speak to proper real human beings who've experienced London, and come and experience London for yourself to understand and appreciate what a great city we are. And we are genuinely the best global city in the world, and in my view, the greatest city in the world.
Thank you. We'll move on now to air quality and environment, and we'll begin, I think, with a question from Francesco, who is from Ealing.
Hi, hello. My question is about Heathrow expansion. I would like to know what is planned to minimize or manage the impact that this could have on air pollution and noise pollution when it will be open, but also the impacts during the works, which I understand are quite long, something like 10, 15 years, because I expect they will impact the whole area, so West London in general.
Can I just ask you what your views are on the expansion?
I don't have a very strong position, to be honest. So on one side, I understand that it could be an opportunity and probably is overdue and required. On the other hand, I live in the area, so I'm a bit worried about the impact it could have.
Great. you're what I call a floating voter. So I want to ask you the same question after my answer. See if I've,
No, you're not. Get on with it.
See if I've moved you. So look, Heathrow is an airport that's an incredibly important airport to our country and to Europe. It's a hub airport as well. I think we should have a better Heathrow, not a bigger one. So where Heathrow is built, it's the biggest conurbation of anywhere in Europe. It's just not the right place for a huge airport like Heathrow. There is a cap on the number of flights that can go there, just below 500,000 a day, and there is a limit on when you can fly. You can't fly at night time around Heathrow. My concern about a third runway at Heathrow is the problems it causes for air quality. I've spent a lot of time over the last 9 years trying to improve the quality of air in London. You can't see particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide. It leads to premature deaths, asthma, heart disease, cancer, and potentially dementia. So if there are more planes at Heathrow because of a new runway, it causes problems on air quality. Noise pollution is a big challenge. You will know, as Ealing resident, Francesco, the current challenges with there being a cap on the number of flights. Imagine if that cap was lifted, so more flights, potentially at night time as well. But here's the real problem with a new runway at Heathrow. To build a new runway at Heathrow, you've got to make sure that the busiest motorway in the country, the M25, goes underground. So the new runway goes above where the M25 is. You've got to divert the M4 and A4. You've got to increase public transport capacity, Elizabeth Line, Piccadilly Line, Central Line, and so forth. And you've got to get rid of those villages that are there as well.
Is it going to happen?
Well, if you're the Chancellor, you think it is. If you're somebody who understands Heathrow and has spoken to experts, I think it's not.
There's a growing gap between you and the Labour government, isn't there, in almost every issue that's come up tonight. So you think Rachel Reeves is having a proverbial laugh when she talks about this runway being successfully constructed?
I think in the context of a second runway at Gatwick, expansion of Luton, expansion of Stansted, expansion of City, it begs the question, why expand Heathrow? But Francesco's key point is, you've got 15 years of hell. 15 years of hell. Who's going to pay for the motorway to go underground? Who's going to pay for the M4 and the M4? Who's going to pay for the new trains on the Elizabeth Line and the Piccadilly line? I tell you this, for a fraction of that, you can have the DLR extended to Thamesmead, tens of thousands of homes, tens of thousands of jobs and growth. Now, James, your permission. Francesco, what would you choose? Runway at Heathrow or the DLR extension at Thamesmead?
That should be maybe thought about Luton expansion, which I also read about, and Gatwick as well. So, yeah, I would prefer probably that option.
I mean, you're not going to deal with much international travel by expanding the DLR.
Gatwick, Luton and Stansted and City
would all come in on that. So are you going to continue to resist this? I mean, I sense, and I didn't sense this last time we spoke about it, that you think, A, it's unlikely to happen, and that B, you will therefore prevail if you continue to resist it. I think May was the busiest on record for Heathrow, 7.2 million passengers travelling through its 4 terminals.
Yes, I'm not one of those people that says we should close down all airports, nor am I saying that Heathrow is a bad thing. What I'm saying is we shouldn't have a new runway at Heathrow. And I think it's really important to understand I'm pro-growth. I'm somebody who is, understands the importance of us being a capital city, understands the importance of us being a global city with great links across the globe. I don't think runway 3 at Heathrow is the answer.
Okay. A question's been sent in by Zane, who's listening at home in Haringey. He wants to know whether the ULEZ, which of course was an incredibly fractious period, was worth it. Do we know whether or not it has actually helped?
Well, with your permission, James, I'll bring in Mete, who has wasn't here for the battles, but he's here to tell us. He's here to sort of, share in the glory.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in so many ways this is such an important issue to Londoners. I myself, partly the reason why I always admit to people I'm not a traditional environmentalist, and partly the reason why I grew to care about this issue is partly because I come from a community which disproportionately impacted from an air quality crisis that they didn't cause in the first place. And when the mayor first became elected in 2016, experts told him that it would take 193 years for us to reach legal limits of pollution levels in London. We're now on track to reach that this year because of bold steps that we've taken with ULEZ expansion, and the results have been remarkable for Londoners. In London alone, roadside nitrogen dioxide levels are down by 54% and 24% out of London. But we've also made sure that we're also supporting Londoners in making sure that their vehicles are compliant too. So 54,000 people have been successful applicants in terms of the scrappage scheme, which the Mayor put behind ULEZ, which is approximately just under £200 million of investment where we're helping support Londoners. So now we have 97% of vehicles in London are now compliant with our clean air standards. So it has worked, to answer the question. We're very, very ambitious on this agenda because we do very much see it as an issue of social justice, racial justice, but also economic justice. And it's about making sure that we know that lots of residents in London don't have a choice about where they live. They don't have the financial means to say, hey, I don't like living here because it's got bad air quality, so therefore I'm going to go rent somewhere else or go buy a property elsewhere. So it's our job to make sure that we're cleaning their air. And as I always say, the final point that I'll make on this point is, how many people in this room would drink dirty water? The point is,
For the benefit of people listening at home, one joker put his hand up, I think.
The point is we all need oxygen to breathe, right? So why have we normalized something that should never, ever, ever have been normalized? Just because it's always been like this, it should just never have been like this. So like my point is London should never just be a place where we live to work. It should be a place where we create thriving neighborhoods. So whether that's clean air quality, making sure that we've got good public thriving spaces, energy efficient homes, that's what we're delivering in London.
Sadiq, why do you think, looking back, it became such a febrile issue? I've been doing my job for quite a long time. I'm no stranger to violent public reactions to some political decisions and some policies, but I was taken aback by the vitriol that was stirred up over ULEZ, and it seemed to disappear almost overnight. I suppose the peak might have been the Uxbridge by-election, but when you look back at some of the personal abuse that you received, why do you think this issue became such a hot topic?
Well, can I just deal with Zane's question, which is, I don't want to pretend it was easy. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my professional life. And there were times where I had self-doubt because of not just because of the abuse and the threats to my life and the abuse of my family and our home and so forth, but because you can sometimes make the mistake as a politician of thinking a vocal minority speak for everyone. And we spent a lot of time, my team and I, going out, and the silent majority, as Mete said, actually won't put up with dirty water. And when you explain to them this stuff they can't see and what it causes, the silent majority were on our side. And it's for others to explain why in the Uxbridge by-election, both the main parties were opposed to clean air. And as a consequence, the Conservatives won the by-election. But you will know, James, I've always been quite clear about my role as a politician in an unpatronising way, educating people about the benefits of cycling, the benefits of walking, the benefits of breathing clean air. And I think what worries me, James, to answer your question is, it's become a proxy for a culture war. You're seeing more and more things being used as a proxy for a culture war. It could be graffiti in our capital city. It could be fare evasion in our capital city. It could be clean air, inverted commas, anti-car, and on and on and on. And you said something really interesting a few moments ago, which is social media giving the impression this is normal. And the impression was given that everyone was against the clean air. Everyone was, against our kids not getting smaller lungs and so forth. And I'm really pleased and proud that people, stood with us. And you will remember, because we spoke about this during the mayoral campaign, I said, on the ballot paper is clean air. My main opponent wants to reverse ULEZ. I'm quite clear where I stand. We got the biggest swing to an incumbent in the 25 years of mayoral elections, and I'm really proud of this city for doing that.
On the subject, appropriately enough, of dirty water, Hope in Hackney would like to know whether it is really possible to clean up the rivers in London.
Absolutely. Look, King's College, as Mete said, told me it would take 200 years to clean up our air. I think because I've got Mete as the deputy, we could do the rivers in 10 years. And Mete's got a plan. Mete's managed to get Thames Water to be grown up and sensible and has managed to get money out of them. And it's not your money, by the way. It's Thames Water's money. Mete.
Yeah, no pressure, thank you. Look, firstly, I think it's an absolute scandal that all 41 of our rivers in London are currently badly ecologically rated. And again, it's something that we've just sort of accepted because it's always been like that. Something that, again, should never have been normalized. I think one of the things that we all learned from the pandemic is people really grew to appreciate, both the green spaces, the outdoor spaces, but also some of the blue spaces as well. And so we've got a really bold plan to make sure that we can clean our waterways in the next 10 years. So that's by doing a number of things. So firstly, we want to make sure that it's not just a plan that gets put on a shelf. We want to make sure that in this mayoral term, we can make sure that we both look at identifying specific sites in London that we can make much more accessible for Londoners, whether that's looking at maybe open river, water swimming, for example. We've already got 8 sites across London. But also thinking about the interlink between the green and blue spaces too. So making sure that we've got nice green footpaths alongside our waterways as well, so that residents actually across our city can actually enjoy their waterways as they go out for walks with their families to unwind, with their friends to go out for a company, or just by themselves for their own mental health, which is really, really important as well. And we want to also look at nature-based solutions. We brought back beavers to London after 400 years. Beavers really important because it has a huge role to play in flood resilience in London. I went to visit Ealing Paradise Park together with Bassam here, who's the assembly member, and it's incredible. They've built all of these dams, which has stopped some of the flooding from the nearby stations. So nature-based solutions will have a huge role to play in cleaning our waterways as well. So we're very, very clear that our plan to clean our waterways is not just going to be a 10-year bold, ambitious plan. Of course, we want to deliver on that, but we want to see tangible action that we can deliver in this next 3 years. But also, finally, I should just say, making sure that we're holding those to account, like Thames Water, who've taken Londoners for a long, I must say, for years and years of mismanagement and illegally polluting our rivers over the last decades. And so what myself and the mayor have been doing, when I first started actually in my job, the mayor, the first thing he asked me to do was to summon the CEO of Thames Water to City Hall to make sure that Londoners won't pay the price for their failures and make sure that they actually support our waterways plan. So we're very proud. Together we had a roundtable where we raised £1.8 billion to make sure that we can get investment in cleaning our waterways.
I can't believe I'm about to ask this question, but are there any plans for any other beavers?
There are, but can I say the first 2 beavers we named Justin Beaver and Sigourney Beaver, and they've had kids. And there are more beavers now in London, aren't there?
There are more beavers in London.
And other rivers are going to be having them introduced?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. You live and learn. We will move on now to housing, which is traditionally one of the most important and interesting topics that we discuss at this event. And we'll begin with a question, I think, from Yusuf, who hails from Redbridge.
At 16 years old, I don't think it's right for me to be talking about housing. But what I will say is, housing is something...
16-year-olds need places to live as well, Yusuf.
I'll get to that. And yeah, housing is a milestone. Housing gives you security, that warmth. It's where you have a family and where you can be well off. But not everybody has that opportunity. And I look at my school and I know people who are sleeping in their cars and who are sofa surfing and are moving from one point to another, switching schools, and you don't get a last word to speak with them. That's a problem. If you've got a family of 6 and you've got a child with special educational needs and they're in a tall flat, sky-rise, and they're sharing 1 bedroom, that's a problem. And when you take into account things like damp and all these other issues, that raises even more concerns, and no one in this room would tolerate that for their families, so why should we allow it for them? I'd also say this, local authorities are stretched in terms of their funding, how much they're spending on temporary accommodation. So how will we cut the red tape? How will we make sure that funding is directed appropriately and in generous amounts to them so that they can help the most vulnerable, including the people in my school? Thank you.
Well, Yusuf, thanks for your question and reminding us that there are 90,000 children living in temporary accommodation in our city. I'm somebody who's raised in a council estate, so I understand the experiences of your friends that you've articulated. But my parents had the security of a council home, so I knew I'd go home to the same place. I knew there wouldn't be served a notice to evict from a dodgy private landlord, but also my dad as a bus driver and mum as a seamstress knew they could afford to pay the rent. And I'll bring Tom Copley in, who's one of the country's leading experts, but this is an example of an area where I want to thank and commend a member of the cabinet, Angela Rayner, the work she's doing to address this issue in terms of the housing crisis. And before I bring Tommy, let me tell you, it's personal to me because of my background, but look, research and evidence shows that by 2030, 1 out of 3 adults in London with a good job will still be living with their mum and dad, 1 out of 3. Now, I love my daughters, but at some stage, they've got to leave. Tom.
Thank you, Sadiq, and thank you for the question. And I think you very eloquently identified the scale of the problem and the impact that it has. Housing is so fundamental to people's lives. You cannot lead a good and happy life if your housing situation is poor. And there are far too many people in London who are, as you say, living in temporary accommodation. And the impact that has on people's health, both mental and physical, on children's education, on the local economy. People who are having to spend so much on rent, not able to then spend that in their local high street and things like that. The knock-on impacts of the housing crisis on so many other areas is absolutely profound, and it's why we really have to get this right. And as Sadiq has said, Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Secretary Angela Rayner, she really played a blinder in this. She got £39 billion out of the Chancellor over 10 years for the next Affordable Homes Programme. If you average that out, that's annually, that's 70% more than we got from the previous government. She also put in place a package of other measures which are really going to help London's social landlords, councils, housing associations with their finances that have been really battered over the last few years. So that was absolutely fantastic. But what I would add, and you're going to keep hearing the Docklands Light Railway extension tonight, but the DLR is so important, not just for transport, but also for housing. As Sadiq has said, it will support tens of thousands of homes. And you could build the Docklands Light Railway extension with the money that councils are spending in London on temporary accommodation in a single year and still have change left over. That's the amount of money that we are spending, or councils are spending, £4 million a day on housing people in temporary accommodation that is often so poor and so substandard. We have to change that.
How worried and indeed how informed are you about the threat that mould poses in the kind of homes that Yusuf has been talking about, the particularly substandard ones? You'll know that LBC has spoken to the parents of a baby boy who died at just 15 weeks old at Akram Mohammed, living with 2 siblings in a 1-bedroom flat, and it was mould ridden. I mean, on a personal level, I have a feeling that this is going to become one of the big stories of the next 10 years, and I wonder what City Hall is doing about it.
Absolutely. Just to say on that particular case, we're still, of course, waiting for the coroner's report. So, we do have to be a little bit careful on that specific case. But yes, in general, mould has a terrible impact on people's health. And a lot of the time it is driven by poverty itself, because as Yusuf has pointed out, you've got whole families crammed into 1 or 2 2-bedroom homes. That is going to lead to mould. And that's why it's important, first of all, that we're building the high quality, new, decent, social and affordable housing for those people, but also important that the social landlords themselves are dealing with this issue. And that's why we really support Awab's law, which the government has brought in, which is going to create new requirements for social landlords to deal with damp and mould quickly.
Let's deal with the issue, another issue with the damp and mould that Tom mentioned, which is often just what happens is if you're a tenant with a private landlord, and 2.7 million Londoners have a private landlord, if you raise a complaint, Mr. Landlord, my property's got damp and mould, the landlord will either ignore you or serve you notice to quit because you're being a pain, you're being a nuisance, and you've got to leave. And so many people, James, live in these awful accommodation and are too nervous and scared to raise it with their private landlord. And what the government's doing, and Angela deserves huge credit, is changing the law getting rid of the ability of the landlord to get rid of you without any good reason, giving more rights to tenants, not just council tenants, but tenants with a private landlord as well. And that's really, really important because, as James said, not just young Awab in Greater Manchester, but potentially another young British person could have lost their lives because of damp and mould.
Is Angela Rayner your favourite cabinet minister?
I've got lots of favourite cabinet ministers, but she's one of them.
Kyan Islington draws our attention to another issue that is almost constant in London, but seems to have increased. He refers to people sleeping rough on our streets, describes it as unacceptable. Are they right? And what are you doing to fix it?
So the numbers
and actually, we should talk about Angela Rayner again, because the decriminalisation of homelessness is one of the big stories of this week. What difference is that likely?
Yeah, so look, I mean, so rough sleeping has gone up across our country, and London's not excluded, over the last 14 years. We've managed to take off our streets 18,000 rough sleepers. 75% have stayed off our streets, but there are more and more people who are new arriving on our streets sleeping roughs. Now, we do a very good job when somebody's sleeping rough, making sure they don't sleep rough for a second or third night. We've got outreach workers who go out, Tom, and speak to them and get them somewhere. What you want to do is stop them getting on the streets in the first place, the first night out. So what Tom has done is come up with an idea to have these hubs across London, working with people before they get on the streets by having people in residential day centres and so forth. And the idea, the prize, James, is to stop them before they end up on our streets. The good news in London, by the way, is the police don't, unlike other parts of the country, arrest people for being rough sleepers. There are still laws in the statute books that gives the police the power to do so. That hasn't happened in London.
Thank you. We'll go, I think, next to Gloria, who's from Battersea. Gloria, what's your question?
Well, it's pretty much about foreign investment, because it seems to me that a lot of foreigners are creating a lot of expensive developments that are only affordable to the other foreign tourists, and then Londoners, local Londoners and English people is pushed further and further away. And I'm like, because I used to work as an accountant for property management, I was surprised as are the portfolios I own by Hong Kong, the Middle East. It's like a lot of properties manage remote control, and then we are sustaining people who live abroad, and then they leave the developments and the flats at very high prices here that Londoners can simply not afford. I have another question about roadworks. I don't know, that's a quick one.
No,
who plans the roadworks?
We may have time for that, but I mean,
no,
we've broken it
because
down
it's getting overwhelming and creating a lot of chaos in traffic in London. So those are the two questions that I got.
Well, I'm bringing Tom to answer your question about foreign investors, and then
do we still have a problem with empty apartments?
Yeah, we do.
That are generating so much increase in value that it's better than having your money in gold bullion or
correct. I mean, literally, but before Tom answers, just to qualify, I have nothing against foreigners. Some of my best friends are foreigners, but I'll bring Tom to answer the issue of homes being used as gold bricks by foreigners and the way that the system is broken. Tom.
Yes, absolutely. And look, particularly on the subject of homes being bought up and then left empty, I remember a previous mayor of London calling for 1,000% council tax on empty homes. Of course, that mayor of London became prime minister and then proceeded to do absolutely nothing to implement that. But certainly, I think we should be putting in the government. It would be good to put in place higher council tax on empty properties. On foreign investment, I think that we have to distinguish between people buying up property, just buying up individual properties, leaving them empty, but then the kind of foreign overseas investment we need that actually delivers new homes. I think they're two very, very different things. But certainly, I think that there are tax measures that could be taken to address some of the issues that you've just raised. Well, like the increase in council tax, for example.
We could also have a first dibs for Londoners, like we've got in some schemes. So basically, when a property is about to be completed, for the first few months, only Londoners can purchase that property. The issue is sometimes the way the business model works is developers sell a property off plan overseas before it's been completed, and you can't get a mortgage unless home's been completed. So there is an issue with the model that we can actually persuade the government to try and change.
Other governments do, don't they? I mean, there are countries, and I suppose this could be a Brexit benefit. We're not bound by anybody else, so we could have rules about
absolutely
country of origin and property ownership.
We can have rules in relation to procurement of buses only made in Britain, or trains only made in Britain, or when it comes to homes and so forth. There's nothing stopping us having these bold policies, and it's not being racist. That's recognising we've got a genuine housing need, and it's not unreasonable to be building homes that local residents can live in. When Kaya was leader of Islington, they had a policy there where then, when they regenerated an estate, the residents, local residents, who lived through the pain of that regeneration got first dibs, right?
Yeah, local letting scheme.
Yeah. Connor in Lambeth raises quite a topical point about the council there using Section 21 notices to mass evict tenants, many of whom he says would be classified as vulnerable and could become homeless if evicted. It's a Labour-led council. The current Labour government is about to abolish Section 21. As the Mayor of London, what are you going to do to prevent Lambeth Council from evicting dozens of vulnerable families?
Well, I will follow that up. I'll follow up tonight in relation to if Lambeth Council are doing that. We've had, so I'm not sure whether they are, by the way. We have heard stories of unscrupulous landlords taking advantage of the law coming in advance of the law coming in, getting the Section 21 notice in, because the commencement of the law has not yet happened, has it?
Yes, it's absolutely. But what I would say is that we have been waiting so long for this law. The previous government, I think, first promised it in 2017, and it's been dragging on. And finally, and I'm going to mention her again, Angela Rayner has brought forward the legislation in order to get rid of Section 21 no-fault eviction. It is a big, big moment for private renters who will be finally given that security that is so needed.
I wonder if she can fix the roadworks. Does anyone want to handle that question?
I can come in on the roadworks piece.
Please.
Roadworks in London are a significant problem. It creates a huge amount of delays for buses and people trying to get around in terms of freight. One of the challenges we face is that we're an old city. If you dig under our roads, you've got old plumbing, you've got old electricity, we've got old, some of the infrastructure is aging. That needs replacing. And during COVID, there was less of that work. And post then, we've had a flurry of activity because we need that water to work. We don't want the leaks creating the high bills. We don't want that pollution. We need our electricity to be working. We need our gas to work. We need our internet to work to drive growth. So it's essential we have those changes happening on the road. But as you said, it needs to be coordinated. So in 2019, the Mayor brought in the first infrastructure coordination group, which is run by the GLA. It partners with utility companies across the city and all those people who are having to try and fix the work. In that time, by working together, by saying, look, you're digging up the road here, can't you do your works at the same time, for example? Yeah. So why have you got a water company digging it up, and then you've got a gas company digging it up, and then you've got a phone company digging it up? To pull that together, that has saved, since that came in, 1,369 days worth of roadworks. But that's not enough. Like, that is an important part of the coordination. There are other things that need to come in too to actually tackle that challenge of congestion. We've just brought in a new traffic light system, and that will use a new technology, artificial intelligence, etc., to be able to look at the number of cars, the number of queues that are happening, changing those lights, giving priority for when people need to cross the road. So outside schools, for example, can we make those the crossing time slightly longer when kids are walking into schools to get through, but open it up when there aren't those people waiting through, to allow that essential traffic to move. So coordination, you're absolutely right. That new technology and embracing that, using that properly is essential. Having the bus lanes to ensure the buses are reliable for people. We're putting in 25 kilometres of new bus lanes. That should be finished by the end of the year. And finally, there's a piece around lane rental. We should be, in a Transport for London, on the red routes, where you get the double yellow and the single yellow red lines. We have a great scheme there which charges utility companies to dig up the roads. Yep. So that brings in an income to look at how we pay for that new technology, for example. But most importantly, those companies do not want to be spending more time on the roads than they have to because they're getting charged per day. So lo and behold, they start working together. They do things quicker. They have new construction technologies. So collectively, working together, we are tackling this, but it is an enormous problem because we're a big city, we're a busy city, and some of our infrastructure needs replacing really urgently.
Thank you, Will. We'll move on now to London's economy. We are quite short of time, so please be aware of that. And we'll begin with a question from Dinsdale, who is from Bermondsey.
Sir Sadiq, congratulations on your knighthood, well deserved, and thank you and your team for your dedication looking after London. This is amazing, it's like as if this is scripted. I was actually going to ask a question about AI and whether you have a team coordinating with central government with regard to implementation of new technology and making sure that London comes first.
Great question. I'll bring in Howard, who is soon to be replaced by AI.
Aren't we all?
We're doing a lot. I mean, we think AI is one of the places where we can be the global epicenter of this. And Howard and I were at London Tech Week this week, and we've done lots of work in this area. Howard.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's a huge opportunity here. AI is going to change the world. It already is changing the world. We are at the start of what is sort of the third or fourth information revolution. There are going to be places in the world where AI is actually going to have a very negative impact, I think. That we sort of replacing jobs, changing a lot of things. People have to adapt to that, and there'll be a bit of that in London. But we want to be the place where AI is also created. So we want to be on the top of this revolution. We already are doing really well. So our universities, we've got some of the best universities in the world in this sector. We've obviously got a really good base in terms of the tech sector in London. We've been a centre for financial technology for a long time. So a lot of the technologies that underpin AI are already very prevalent in London. That's meant that actually we are probably number 2 place in the world for AI right now. We've got 1,300 startup and scale-up businesses that are either delivering AI or are AI based. And with the government's, one of the good announcements in the government's spending review was extra money for training people up to understand AI and to work in it. We'll get our fair share of that. But we're working directly with government on making sure London does become the AI capital of the world, and that we can not only get people jobs in the new industries that are being created by AI, but actually bring AI to the benefit of the use of the people of London. So, for example, we're using AI ourselves in some of the work we're doing. We're working with the National Health Service, and we've got some announcements coming out later this year, which I can't talk about yet, about how we use data in the NHS, both in terms of providing a better service for patients, but also as a way to develop new drugs and techniques and technologies. Some amazing stuff going on in London. So it's right at the top of our agenda. It's one of our sectors in the growth plan we said we wanted to focus on, and we want to make sure everybody in London has the opportunity to take part in this new revolution. Yeah.
I mean, let me give you 3 examples where it's just transformative now. Diagnosing cancer. We're using AI, far more effective than brilliant doctors. We're using AI. Police officers, rather than looking at photographs and who's wanted, when there's people, using live facial recognition with the right safeguards. So it's the right regulatory framework and the right ethical framework as well. James raised earlier on the really serious issue about damp and mold. We're using AI sensors in terms of putting them in properties to look at whether there's damp and mold, rather than somebody having to report it as well. So what we're going to do is be at the cutting edge of this, so we can have the right safeguards, the right ethical framework. And this is another example where we're working with the government. To name another great member of the cabinet, Peter Kyle, has worked really well with us in terms of Imperial College, King's College, UCL, some of that great learning base we have, being at the centre of this globally, and it's really important that we do that.
Why, in the unlikely event of me being a tech bro and wanting to open a massive AI company, why would I come to London and not Dublin?
It's the word is agglomeration. It's the agglomeration of things in London that there aren't in any city in the world. So So Dublin is a great city, by the way.
It's also got a lot of agglomeration.
Well, I'll give you an example why Dublin. The problem is I don't want to speak ill of Dublin. Let me use a hypothetical city.
But that's probably the obvious choice for
Don't compare Dublin to London. I mean, come on.
Google did, and they went to Dublin.
Well, some of it did, but you've been to the Google campus in King's Cross. I mean, I'll have a competition with Dublin any day. But look, so we've got financial services, professional services, higher education, life sciences, culture, creative industries, and on. But also, we've got more universities in the top 40 in the world than any city in the world. So our pipeline of talent is amazing. And a better comparator is, go to America. So in America, if you want the tech bros, you go Silicon Valley. If you want culture, you go Los Angeles. If you want finance, you go New York. If you want policymakers, you go Washington. We've got all of that within a 50-minute tube ride in London. And that's one of the reasons why I'd say, in a respectful way, because I love Dublin, come to London, not Dublin.
Thank you. A question next, I think, and we are, I keep saying this, it's my job to be aware of it, not yours, but we are short of time. A question from Joe from Soho, please. Hello, Joe.
Thank you. Hi. Soho has long been the UK's symbol of inclusivity, creativity and economic vitality, yet it now faces mounting pressure from crime, over-regulation, noise complaints and licensing restrictions that are penalising rather than supporting its success. What concrete actions will you take to protect and revitalise Soho in the wider central activity zone, not blaming vibrancy or noise? And how do we bridge the historic divisions of the Mayor versus Westminster, as well as licensing, planning, police and transport?
So that's a cracking question. Are you a resident there, or are you involved in a business?
Both.
Both, okay. Well, I'll bring Howard in because we're doing some work. Let me just introduce that, Joe, by saying, look, I think Soho is one of the best places in our city. But you will know it's had better years in the past. I mean, I spent too much time at Rodney Scott's in Little Italy, just to name two places that I spend a lot of time in. But you will know, actually, whether it's the pedicabs, whether it's issues around some of the antisocial behaviour, whether it's some of the restrictions on licensing, whether it's that tension between residents and businesses, it needs to be resolved. So we persuaded James and I's best cabinet member, Angela Rayner, to devolve us licensing powers, working with the council, working with the residents, working with the businesses. Howard, do you want to just talk about in a minute and a half, some of the things we can promise residents?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've met, obviously, to talk exactly about this. We want to work together with Westminster, together with businesses, and also with residents as well, to make sure that as we take over licensing, we've got the big proposal on taking over Oxford Street, pedestrianising Oxford Street, putting a mayoral development corporation there. So really looking at the West End, and it was in the heart of the growth plan, actually, as it's the jewel of London. It's the place that tourists come to. It's the place that people think about, when they come on holiday to Central London. But visitors from all over the city come to it. So we want to make sure we've got a balanced approach. So we're supporting residents, reducing noise, reducing crime, bringing in more positive things like having the streets quieter, having more chairs and tables outside, having the restaurants open a bit later. So it's not all about noisy clubs and very late night entertainment, but stretching out some of those things so that you can stay a bit longer and have a quieter drink, particularly in this fantastic weather. So it's a balance, but we've got a plan. It does mean working together with all sections of the community, and that's one of the reasons why us having the licensing power enables us to set some of those overall policies and bring people together under that umbrella. I was actually at Heart of London Business Alliance this lunchtime talking about exactly that and how we can work together to crack down on crime. There are 3,000 across the West End, 3,000 door supervisors. Yeah, we can get those working with the police. They've also got private security that some of the business improvement districts support. We can really tackle crime together if we do it as one partnership.
Well, we're going to Soho now.
What?
We're going to Soho now, Howard and I.
Yeah, we're going out now, and they're like, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Be careful. I just want to thank the sign language team this evening, if I may, Anne-Marie and Nikki, who were supported by Liz and Abdul Karim. Also, something that I've always wanted to do when we have sign language interpreters in the room. I just want to see what happens now, and this may not work on the radio. Flocky knocky nihilipilification. Wow. I think there was a throwaway comment a little earlier, but I'd like a straight answer to the question of whether you're going to run for mayor again in 2028.
I think we've got the best job in the world, and
I think yes or no would do.
How long we got?
Yeah, as long as you want.
I love
Hold
this
the
job.
news.
I love this job. I mean, I know you love your job, James. As long as Londoners put their trust in me, as long as my family support me, I'll do this job.
That's a yes. We are now out of time. I'd like to thank everybody who has...
This has not gone away. It's been silent.
Thank you. So are you now. We're out of time now. I'd like to thank everybody who has come along tonight, as well as those of you listening or watching on LB News or on the LBC app. I'd also like to thank the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, and his deputies, Howard Dorber, Tom Copley, Mette Coburn, Kaya Coma-Schwartz, and Will Norman. And, of course, Mr. Angry. You've been listening to the State of London debate with me, James O'Brien. Coverage continues on LBC News now with James Hansen. It is, and listeners to my radio programme will know that I never get this right, it's exactly 9 o'clock.